Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I analyse games using the mindset of speedrunning and look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people first play the game. Next, the speedrun experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. And finally, the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description and chapters on the video. Today we're looking at Ducktales for the NES, which is a pretty wonderful platformer. Now before we get stuck into it, if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing to keep up to date as it helps out the channel a whole bunch. So what is this game? Well, at heart it's essentially just a platformer. I actually tried this game a long time ago and got put off because I couldn't figure out the pogo mechanics. But essentially if you jump and then hold down with the attack button, you can pogo like this and bounce off enemies and stuff. Once you do figure that out, the mechanic is really fun to use. I think in DuckTales 2 they made it a bit easier to do, at least it feels like that to me. So in DuckTales 1 you just have to figure it out for yourself. Along with the pogo mechanics, you can also pick up objects and stuff. The game is themed pretty strongly around money, and that's your main collectible for score in the game. You actually have this part as well where you have to pay some money to get through, although there are many ways to skip this. So if you can't pay the money to get through, you can actually just bounce off an enemy to the left hand side of the room. But if you don't want to do that, there's also another shortcut towards the left of the level as well. I actually thought when I first played this game that you were going to have to use money quite a bit to get past various different roadblocks, and that would have been a pretty cool idea if they'd implemented it, because it would have given you some incentive to explore around without needing to get absolutely everything. This game was released by Capcom, so it follows sort of like a Mega Man style, I suppose. You pick what level you want to go into, and then there's usually a short level with a boss at the end of it. Although unlike Mega Man, you don't get power-ups from different levels, so the order you play them in doesn't really matter at all. You do get this level Transylvania, and this is, I guess, the most confusing level with where to go. It's got lots of hidden walls and stuff, and you can just be wandering around here for ages, not really sure what to do. Once you do know where to go though, it's a pretty quick level. And funny thing about this stage, those RIPs used to be crosses in a beta version, and I think the Japanese version as well. Funny how they changed that in old Nintendo games. And you do have some sections where the pogo mechanic is used in a pretty cool way. You can bounce across spikes and stuff, and there's lots of little obstacle coursey sections like this. In fact, if you get good enough at bouncing, you can even take a pretty big shortcut in the next level down here just by bouncing off enemies to the right. You actually get a little secret treasure by doing this bouncing as well in that chest there, but getting the treasures doesn't really do anything that special, so you often don't bother. DuckTales also has a classic ice level where you've got slippery ice physics, but realistically it's pretty short if you know where you're going, so they don't really cause too much of an issue. Now if you play the game normally, it caps off with the moon level. Now this is probably the most memorable level in the game, mainly because of the music. It's the classic music. I don't know why it's so well known, but everyone seems to know it. But the moon is also pretty non-linear. You've got this block path towards the end, so you have to go exploring up in this UFO thing to get a key to open it, essentially. And there's a few different things you have to do up here, but pretty much you just have to go up this path. I think for that reason, you'd find as kids you would probably spend a little bit of more time on the moon than you would other levels. And the moon's kind of difficult as well with some of the enemies they got around. So yeah, it's a pretty fun play, but it does get a little bit non-linear at this point. If you do want to get the hidden treasure on the moon as well, you have this really cool obstacle course bit with a whole bunch of spikes and enemies and stuff. So it'd be cool if there was a little category for getting all the treasures, but as far as I can tell there isn't really. And eventually once you get your key, this dude comes out to help you and just blasts away that block there and you can make it through to the end. Well, when you beat the game, you go to the last level. Now normally this would be a exciting new level, but it's actually just Transylvania again. Which is kind of anticlimactic in my opinion. You literally just play the same level twice, but it does have a different boss at the end there. If you don't want to see that boss, you may want to skip ahead to the speedrun part, because there may be some spoilers here, otherwise I'll go into that now. So the boss here is this vampire dude, and it's got pretty cool mechanics. You have to bounce on the bats there. The bats are actually really tricky to navigate around, because if you jump straight up, the bats fly up really high and you actually can't bounce on them, so you really have to wait to jump probably a lot longer than naturally you would expect to. But once you do that, the boss is pretty easy. And then once the boss is done, we can move over Metroid because Ducktales has its own escape sequence. You climb up this rope and you basically just have to get to the treasure chest first. It's not that hard to do if you know what you're doing there. And that's pretty much the end of the game. So this is a really fun platformer. I definitely would recommend it, and I only played it for the first time just a couple weeks ago, so I really enjoyed it, but you just got to get your head around the bouncing physics. And once you do, you've got a grand old time. And it's not a very long game. You can finish it in probably under 10 minutes pretty easily, but the first time you play it, it might take you like 30 minutes to an hour or something like that. Alright, so we'll move on to looking at the speedrun now. You can see pretty much there's any percent and then the 1 player 2 controller category, so I just mainly focus on this any percent category for now, and there's quite a few runners here. Probably because it's a short game that's pretty easy to pick up. It's a fun little speed game to try. Alrighty, so we'll start looking at the speedrun. I'll mention that you can usually tell a run's pretty optimized when they actually use the milliseconds to time the run. But Andy starts on the moon, and the reason we're starting on the moon is because we can skip that big trip into the UFO that I talked about before. So normally there's this big green block that is blocking your way, and you have to go up and grab a key and stuff to get it out. But you can just get this enemy there to damage boost you into the wall. That was a pretty quick setup that Andy did there, but there's a slower one where the enemy literally just damages you into the wall. And this run is so optimized that Andy's literally just like counting frames trying to optimize everything there. We've got the rat boss fight here, and Andy jumps coming into the fight just in case the rat runs to the right there, but really the boss fight is about hitting it on the first possible frame here, which is pretty well done in this run. Transylvania comes up next, and it's pretty quick once you know where you're going. But there's this little slow part that you sort of have to do. Pretty much you've got this little small hallway here and you have to hit this ball into the dude. If there's a quicker way to do that, I think that could be a way to save time in the future, but it appears there isn't currently. Also, the boss here is probably one of the biggest RNG bits in the run, with whether it flies high or low. Flying high, you can actually struggle to hit it here, so that's what you don't want. But Andy gets pretty good luck. Now this next level here is actually pretty technical. So we start with a pretty cool skip with these vines literally just bouncing over the spikes. You can probably figure that out without any glitches or anything. And then we start climbing up the vines. So here, rather than climbing up the vines all the way, we're going to use like a little bee damage, bounce mechanic to get up. And then there's this gap with a helicopter that you're supposed to cross. Now the helicopter you normally have to wait for to go back and forth, but with a very precise jump you can actually make it across and also grab the rope there. An alternate method there is to spawn the bee and use that to get across, but that is a little bit slower. Now I mentioned paying the person at the end of this level as well. You don't have to pay them. You could use the skip that I showed before in the casual section, or you can just bounce on this chest and there's an intended hidden shortcut up here. This hidden shortcut just essentially takes you straight to the boss once you do it. So it's a pretty cool way to get through the level, and definitely how I play this level casually these days. So next up we have the mines, and this level's a bit weird because they actually send you back to Transylvania to get a key to get in, but the key's like basically right where you start anyway. And the level essentially has no RNG in it, so you can pretty much just go through this little secret path here and jump on the enemies to get through, and the boss is totally predictable here, so quite a consistent level to be doing. Next up we have Himalayas. Andy goes for a despawn, which unfortunately doesn't work at the start. It doesn't lose that much time though. Then we have this little section down here with the ice physics. So you really want to stay grounded for as long as you can on the ice, because you do move a little bit faster on the ice there, and then only come off the end when you absolutely need to there. So it can be a pretty technical section for that reason there. You basically just need to climb up this rope and you're at the end of the level essentially, but you can damage boost through that thing to save you having to wait for it to come down and everything here. And then you have this auto-scroller with very unusual feeling mechanics on the platform, but it actually kind of works. It stops you from going off the end earlier than you otherwise should. Now the boss fight here, which can be a little bit random here, especially with where those snowballs drop. But if you've got full health coming into it, you can take a bit of damage just to save time there. One thing that I will mention about this level, if you pogo into the snow, you sort of get stuck, so you can't use the normal pogo strats that you otherwise would in the snow level in general. Alright, we got the last level here, so the level's exactly the same, it's just the boss is different, and Andy's going to be going for some double hits on the boss here. So in particular, you can sort of phase up through the boss when it's blinking, and not actually have to use the bats to hit it. So there's a nice little double hit there. There's a bit of RNG as to where the boss spawns. But what Indy is going to do is try and leave the end of the fight, so there's a bat coming to the left right at the end here. So you see that bat there, they're going to be bouncing off it up to the top. Now the reason for that is that you want to be at the top of the rope to climb up and do this escape really quickly. So that was probably a bit of luck, a bit of execution there, but it went really well. And we're about to see the best pop off in speedrunning. So good. Big congrats to Andy, who's spent a lot of time grinding this record down. Alright, now we're going to talk about the TAS. There are actually two categories. We have the baseline in 704 and the bad ending in 747. Now you think bad ending would actually be faster than the baseline TAS, but with bad ending you have to intentionally lose a bunch of money to end with $0. And we're just going to really look at the baseline today. Given the baseline's a 704 and world record RTA is a 707, you can just see how close these are and how optimized the RTA run is, but there's still a little bit of time to save in this TAS setting. Alright, so the game plays on the difficult setting, and the main thing that's going to change here is the damage taken. There's a few other differences, but it doesn't really matter too much. And it starts on the first level, because why not? You can just do it in any order you want. Now in this section we zip over the vines here, so grabbing a vine will center the player on the vine and then make you move forward a little bit faster. It's kind of a common trend in TASs, like if there's a ladder or something, like grab the ladder and then fall off it quickly to gain a few more pixels here. So we're only going to see a few small optimizations in this TAS, but there's a lot of work with lag as well as waiting for that precisely there. The game has sort of a frame rule system, so not 21 frames, but every 2 frames you can end a level. And basically what the TAS is going to be doing is when it's managing lag, whether or not it gets a lag frame, it can sort of slow down to avoid getting a lag frame. And sometimes they'll slow down to avoid the lag frame, and it's just as fast as getting the lag frame. But the difference is with the in-game timer, that sort of ticks down when it's not lagging, but not when it is lagging. So they can always use that to line up whether or not they're on a good frame rule for the level. So essentially the frame rule doesn't really count. We have Transylvania here, and essentially like you can beat the enemies a little bit quicker. So this one here, normally in RTA you'd have to mash, but the TAS will mash perfectly every time exactly when it needs to. So those are how you save off little bits of time. Not to mention the TAS can manipulate this boss exactly where it wants to be without having to get good luck like RTA. There are so many small optimizations in TAS like this bit here. You want to bounce off the goat so that the player is falling really quickly down the hole there, rather than just walking off the edge and then gradually building up falling speed. If you come into it with a lot of falling speed, you're going to save time. That's something that I learned TASing in some of my first TASs that I made, and it's definitely a good skill that transfers across pretty much every platformer game. And the TAS does the moon stage last, but it's going to follow pretty much the same thing. We'll still damage boost through that green bit. One thing that I should mention is that the enemy subpixels carry across different enemies. Now what that actually means is when the enemy's on the screen, it's got a certain pixel that it's at and then like a decimal point value for that pixel. That decimal point when the enemy despawns just stays, and then the next enemy takes on that same decimal point. So if it was like 0.5 of a pixel through, the next enemy would be 2. Also, the TAS RNG manipulates his rat to go to the right, so that's just going to be a bit quicker and allow you to hit it at every possible time. We end with the final fight here, and much like RTA, we have this bat spawn so that we can use it to boost up to the rope there. So by starting at the top of the rope, the TAS can climb pretty dang quickly, and then just end up on this chest here. TAS is normally timed to last input, so sometimes you see funky endings, but that ending looks pretty much the same as RTA. And given timing ends when you touch the treasure chest, TAS and RTA will have similar timing methods. It's also important to mention that this is the 6th TAS that was made of Ducktales, so even TASs, when they can play perfectly, do gradually improve upon things and find optimizations. We like to think that a lot of TASs are perfect, and probably some of them are perfect and couldn't save any more frames. But when you come back to it with a fresh set of eyes and better TASing tools, sometimes you can save a couple frames here and there. So I definitely recommend this game overall casually, and it seems like it would be a pretty fun speedrun as well. That's going to be all for this video, and thanks so much for watching.